Imagine this. You've worked your entire life to reach the top. You've built a multi-million-dollar company, earned respect in your industry, and finally decided to treat yourself to a first-class flight. But the moment you step up to the gate, you're stopped. Not because of your ticket, not because of your luggage, but because of the color of your skin. This is exactly what happened to Marcus Johnson, a self-made black CEO who was denied boarding first class for no reason, other than blatant discrimination. But what the airline didn't know? Marcus wasn't just any passenger. And with one phone call, he was about to shut down their entire operation. The day started like any other business trip. Marcus arrived at the airport, dressed sharp in a tailored suit, his boarding pass in hand. He'd booked first class, a well-deserved upgrade after years of grinding in economy. But as he handed his ticket to the attendant, her smile faded. She glanced at him, then back at the ticket as if she couldn't believe he belonged there. Then came the words no traveler ever wants to hear. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's been a mistake. You'll need to step aside." Confused, Marcus asked for an explanation. Instead of answers, he got excuses. The system must have glitched. First class is full. But when he watched 3 other passengers, all white, board without issue, the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a mistake. This was racism in broad daylight. The gate agent refused to meet his eyes, the manager shrugged him off, and the other passengers looked away, pretending not to notice. But Marcus wasn't about to let this slide. Not today. Not ever. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number, one that would change everything. The person on the other line? A high-powered attorney with connections to the airline's biggest investors. Within minutes, the gate agent's smug confidence turned to panic. Phones started ringing. Managers rushed over, suddenly eager to resolve the situation. But it was too late. Marcus had already set things in motion. And by the time the airline realized who they'd messed with, it wasn't just an apology they owed him. It was their entire business on the line. What happened? Next, let's just say, this airline would never discriminate against another passenger again. But how did Marcus pull it off? And what was the shocking fallout that left the entire aviation industry reeling? That's a story you won't want to miss. Marcus Johnson wasn't always the kind of man who could bring an airline to its knees with a single call. 10 years ago, he was just another hungry entrepreneur with a dream, working out of a tiny apartment, surviving on instant noodles, and sheer determination. His company, a tech startup focused on financial solutions for underserved communities, had been laughed at by investors who claimed there was no market for what he was building. But Marcus knew better. He had grown up watching his mother struggle to get fair loans his father turned away from banks for no good reason. He built his platform for people like them, people the system ignored. And now, after a decade of sleepless nights and relentless hustle, his company was worth over $500 million. That's why this moment at the airport stung so badly. No matter how much he achieved, no matter how many times he proved himself, there were still people who looked at him and saw someone who didn't belong. The gate agent's dismissive tone, the way the manager avoided giving a straight answer, it was all too familiar. But this time, Marcus wasn't a kid getting followed around a store by security. This time he had power, and he was done playing nice. The person on the other end of that call was Daniel Carter, his longtime friend and one of the most feared corporate attorneys in the country. Daniel didn't just win cases, he buried companies. And as fate would have it, he'd recently taken on a major lawsuit against this very airline for racial profiling. The case was still under wraps, but Daniel had uncovered something explosive. Evidence that this wasn't just one bad employee, but a pattern of discrimination hidden behind polished customer service smiles. When Marcus told him what was happening, Daniel didn't hesitate. "Sit tight," he said. "I'm making a call." Meanwhile, the scene at the gate was getting tense. The flight was supposed to board in 15 minutes, but now, the staff kept glancing at Marcus, whispering to each other. A higher-up in a crisp airline blazer suddenly appeared, his face tight with forced politeness. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "we'd like to offer our sincerest apologies for the misunderstanding. Of course, you're welcome in first class. He held out a new boarding pass like it was some grand peace offering, but Marcus didn't move. Misunderstanding? He repeated, his voice calm but sharp. You mean the part where you assumed I couldn't afford this seat? Or the part where you tried to brush me off like I wouldn't notice? The manager's smile flickered. He opened his mouth to respond. But before he could, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face went pale. Across the terminal, other employees' phones were lighting up too. Something was happening, something big. Passengers nearby started murmuring as airline staff rushed around in hushed panic. Then, over the airport speakers, an announcement crackled to life. Attention, passengers. Flight 422 to Chicago is temporarily delayed. We apologize for the inconvenience. Marcus allowed himself a small, cold smile. He knew what was coming. Daniel had just pulled the trigger. What the airline didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just a CEO. He was a major investor in one of the largest travel coalitions in the country. A group that had been quietly gathering data on discriminatory practices across airlines, hotels, and rental car companies. And today, they had all the proof they needed. As the delay stretched on, rumors began swirling among the stranded passengers. Some said the flight crew had walked off. Others whispered about a lawsuit. But only Marcus knew the full truth. This airline's biggest investors had just received an urgent message. A message that included video footage, not just from today, but from dozens of other incidents just like it. Hidden camera clips of black passengers being randomly selected for extra searches, of flight attendants rolling their eyes at non-white travelers in first class, of managers brushing off complaints with empty promises. And now, the airline's stock was plummeting in pre-market trading. A young woman sitting near Marcus leaned over, her voice low. "Hey, are you the reason all this is happening?" she asked. Marcus met her eyes. She was black, probably in her early 20s, holding an economy ticket. He could see the hopeful curiosity in her gaze. Like maybe, just maybe, someone was finally fighting back. He didn't answer her. Instead, he just nodded toward the gate agent who was now frantically typing on her computer. "Watch," he murmured. Then, the unthinkable happened. The airline's CEO, a man whose face usually only appeared in glossy business magazines, suddenly appeared on the airport's overhead screens. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Robert Hargrove, CEO of Skyline Airways. We are deeply sorry to announce that, effective immediately, all flights are grounded, pending an internal review." The terminal erupted into chaos. Passengers gasped, shouted, scrambled to check their phones for updates. But Marcus, he just sat back, watching the stunned airline employees scramble. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because that call he'd made? It wasn't just about today. It was about every single person who'd ever been made to feel unwelcome, disrespected, or less than because of the color of their skin. And the best part? The airline still had no idea who they were really dealing with. Because Marcus Johnson didn't just want an apology. He wanted change. And if they thought grounding a few flights was the end of it, they hadn't been paying attention.